Thank you all for tuning in from all over the world, it looks like. We're going to get started as people still slowly filter in, but thank you so much for joining today. Today's on Nite, Haptics for Increased Immersion. We're excited for, honestly, an incredibly deep panel for talking about haptics today and how we're really seeing true innovations that are allowing us to not just engage with our eyes or with our ears, but actually have fully immersive experiences when it comes to virtual worlds. So really excited to see that. Before we begin, introduce myself briefly. My name is Gavin Newton-Tanzer. I'm Partnership Director for AWE and will be your host today. I have a couple of quick announcements for you, and then we're going to dive into the panel itself. First and foremost, today is one of our many on-nights. We host on-nights generally in person, though now online. We are excited to bring them back. We actually just had our first in-person on-night in Shanghai, but we look forward to having you continue to tune into these as we bring them back into in-person events as well. Of course, it would be remiss to not mention we have AWUSA coming up November 9th through 11th in Santa Clara. It's our flagship annual conference. We really do hope to see you there. In the meantime, however, we do hope that you can connect with us on social. So we are very active in posting with all types of content related, everything from holograms to VR, AR, and of course, haptics. So please do feel free to follow us to get new opportunities and new events like the ones we're going to be doing today. We have launched our AWE Academy for anyone who's looking to kind of really spruce up those skills, whether it comes to web AR or virtual collaboration, anything you'd like to learn about. So we're going to be continually adding new courses there as you move on. And something near and dear to my heart, AWE Asia, unfortunately, I won't be able to attend myself, but there will be virtual participation available for those that want to understand and engage with our community members in XR space from Asia. So we're really excited. It will be an in-person event in Chengdu for those who are able to travel and for those of us that cannot to participate remotely. We are extremely grateful to have an opportunity to have a really robust conversation about haptics today, brought to you by Haptex. We're going to hear a lot about what they're doing, but we are really grateful that it's only because of our sponsors that we're able to provide this type of content, and it's truly an important opportunity to talk about haptics today. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our panelists. Like I said, we've got a really, really deep bench here today. So we're going to give them a chance each to introduce themselves before diving into first questions. Without further ado, let's hear a little bit about your work, Joe, at Haptex. Joe, I believe.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks. Just coming off mute. So hello, I'm Joe Michaels. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Haptex Corporation. We are the company that works very hard to provide lifelike touch simulation. We have been around for about 9 years, made some very exciting announcements earlier today that I'll talk about later regarding funding and sales success. So our key product is the Haptex Gloves DK2. And I lead the sales, marketing, partnerships, pretty much everything customer related for the company, and really excited to sponsor this panel and let you hear from all these super smart and experienced people today.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And Chris, tell us a bit about your work at Immersion.
Thanks, Gavin. My name is Chris Ulrich. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Immersion Corporation. Immersion Corporation has been around since 1993. And the company's only purpose is to innovate and develop new haptic technologies. We don't do anything else. That's our sole function. We don't even make the devices. We primarily develop the technologies and then license them out. Over the past 20 years or so that I've been involved at Immersion, I've done a lot of work in enterprise virtual reality, surgical simulation and training, but then also mass market products like PlayStation 5, iPhone, other Android devices, automotive interfaces, et cetera, et cetera. I'm excited to have a great debate today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. John, tell us about your work at the Academy for Defense Intelligence.
So my name is John Grant. I'm the Technology Innovation Program Manager out of the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency's Academy for Defense Intelligence. We explore capability, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality capability to help expose the workforce to some of that relevant capability to address requirements development. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome, thank you. And Josh, tell us a bit about Mace Virtual Labs and your experience with haptics.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. My name's Josh Bankston, and the team at Mace here, we focus every day on the hardware side of the equation of XR interaction. Privileged enough to work with some of the most brilliant minds in the industry and provide some of the most cutting edge solutions to everybody from mom and pop shops all the way to Fortune 100 companies, and get to help them learn how to properly invest in the right solutions and the right technologies.
Fantastic. Kara, tell me a bit about your research at Stanford. And I know you've been doing deep work with haptics as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Kara Nunes. I'm a PhD candidate at Stanford University. I'm in the Collaborative Haptics and Robotics in Medicine lab. And as Gavin mentioned, my thesis research has focused specifically on haptics. And so a lot of my work looks at designing novel haptic interfaces and then evaluating them. And specifically, I've looked at social touch interactions and how we can create realistic haptic experiences that mimic social touch and human touch.
Awesome, excited to hear more. And a woman that needs no introduction, Nani, please tell us a bit about yourself and probably how you think about haptics.
So hi, yeah, Nani de la Pena. I've been in augmented virtual reality since about 2008, when the iPhone first came out, playing with the AR. But I'm best known for having utilized these technologies for creating nonfiction journalism, immersive journalism, using immersive technologies. I've also, I'm now just starting a brand new center at Arizona State University for emerging media narrative. And I just want to show you a quick clip, because this is going to be very interesting and important, on how we use haptics starting in 2014 and why that this will be relevant for part of our discussion. So you want to just play that for me, Gavin? That'd be great.
Awesome. And so that gives us a really intense dive into it. So we'll be talking a little bit about all of this in a little bit. So let's actually dive into a sort of initial primer. Joe, you want to set the stage for us. How are you thinking about the current state of haptics at Haptex, and where are you putting your efforts at the moment?
Sure. Is this the image that you want on the screen? All the different tiles?
Yes. So like
Okay.
now, yeah. So for now, we're going to have it. We'll go in sort of the open screen with everyone.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Well, hi everyone. It's really a pleasure to be talking to you today. And one thing that I find absolutely fascinating about haptics, the field of the simulation of touch, is that the term haptics is not new. It seems like a new technology and a new field, but the first use of the term haptics dates back to the late 1800s. So this is something that's been fascinating technologists for many generations. And there really are different modalities of touch feedback, everything from vibrotactile feedback to thermal feedback to force and tactile feedback. And each of them really is very different and good at meeting different needs. And that's something I hope we'll get into today. The vibrotactile feedback that you're used to in your mobile phone is perfect for sort of symbolic touch and notifications. And thermal feedback is rarely used, but powerful. Force feedback and especially tactile feedback, which is where Haptex specializes. That's something that's all about. The tactile feedback is really all about deformation of the skin and conveys that lifelike sense of touch for mission critical applications. And there have been really so many advances in all of these areas over the last decade or so that we're really excited to hear from everybody today, to sort of work through what users expect from touch in different spatial computing environments, and how industry can individually invent and offer solutions, and how collectively we can work together to create more of an immersive world using touch feedback. So I'm really excited to hear from the panel and to tell you about how Haptex in particular brings a very lifelike sense of touch for specific industrial applications.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's one of the things that people seem not always to remember. Everything from heat to tactile touch to vibration. These are all very different elements. Chris, I know you work very closely with vibration, and I know it's very close to your heart, sort of making haptics as much of a measure of resource as sound or vision. So tell us a little bit about your work and how you're thinking about haptics.
Sure. So, in the many years that we've been in the haptics business at Immersion, one of the biggest challenges that we come across is the difficulty in having consistent experience for all users. I mean, it would be awesome if everyone could get the Syria video experience that Noni was showing earlier, and she could expect them to have a consistent experience of the sensation, the tactile sensations that she wanted to generate. And so at Immersion, our primary goal is really to scale the entire ecosystem as big as possible. I mean, obviously we have commercial interest in that, but we think that in general, haptics is a first order media type. So in the same category as audio and video is really the ultimate endpoint that we want to get to here. And so our main initiative, at least in my group for the last couple of years, has been to drive standards, in particular normative or governmental type standards through ISO and through other bodies. So we're currently very deeply involved in MPEG, pushing new standards that will allow interoperability of haptic content that's created. So for example, Noni's awesome video can have a haptic track associated with it. And then there can be an expectation that people who are playing it back on an iPhone or on a DK2 or on a haptic vest will get the right kind of experience at the end of the day. And for us, that means that we have to engage broadly across the ecosystem, engage all the different ecosystem players, and then drive everyone towards a general agreement on what these interfaces should be between content creation, software platform layer, and then the hardware interfaces themselves. So that's really our key and major investment right now, is trying to drive those standards across the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, it's a really exciting time. I mean, now with literally hundreds of players in the haptic space and seeing all of these elements come together, exciting to hear about how those standards develop. So John, I know on a completely different sort of perspective here, as actually working out both as an end user yourself and working with other end users, what is your work at the government and how are you sort of empowering people to have access to haptic devices?
Thanks, Gavin. So our main thing right now is, at least this year, has been expressing the importance of facilities. How does somebody go and experience a haptic vest, haptic gloves, or any kind of force feedback, even a driving simulator that's giving them, motion and other haptics? They need to have a place to go to. And what we found out over the last several years is that most large government facilities or even military installations don't have those kind of things to address for the entire community. And that community doesn't have to be necessarily somebody flying an aircraft, somebody driving a tank, which there are generally large simulators available for. But for those who might be just driving around on a military installation because that's part of their job, or driving through a city, it's part of their job. Just think about law enforcement. How many law enforcement activities in every single city has a large scale driving simulation to drive through their cities and stuff, and to feel that environment? That's the key, is to feel that environment. If you don't have the technology, the place to do it, you don't know that you need it. So for us, it's about having a facility available to explore those capabilities.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's like the modern day haptics makerspace of a sense, where people would just get to actually use some of these devices that otherwise might have access to. Well, thank you for that. Eager to learn more in a little bit. And Josh, as sort of a service provider, a solutions provider, how are you thinking about incorporating haptics into your existing solutions, and sort of what's the response been from the people that you're working with so far?
Yeah, that's it. the haptic component has been a critical talking point amongst our customers. You have a certain level of cognitive load that you're dealing with when someone's experiencing any kind of immersive experience, whether it's augmented, virtual, or otherwise. There's only so much data you can take in through your eyes. And so activating extra parts of the body, tapping into proprioception and understanding when your body's moving and how it's being interacted with, you have another layer of data input and output that activates in the mind, that heightens the experience, that allows you to be more fully involved and to have less cognitive dissonance. So it's critical in almost every single interaction when we do demonstrations that we talk about what kind of haptic interaction are the customers going to want, and further, how can we incorporate that into their innovation lab, and then at scale, how can we implement this across the entire fleet?
Oh, fantastic. And I mean, imagine just having that full body experience, or even just tactile experience, has got to just leave a deep impression on customers. Well, fantastic. And Kara, let's take that next step. I mean, we were discussing full body experiences, or the embodiment of experiences, and maybe not necessarily just for training, but I know also with your work in calming and comforting touch. So tell us a bit about sort of what you're seeing and how that plays out.
Yeah, I love that Josh just mentioned how our eyes are channels that get overloaded or overwhelmed, because for me, that's a big thing that I've been looking into as well. Actually, with haptics, if we focus everything specifically on the fingertip and hands, we're leaving out a large area of the body. You know, skin covers our whole body. We're able to have haptic experiences really anywhere through the skin. And so my work has been to develop these devices to try to replicate the type of touches that we would feel in social contexts, as Gavin mentioned, and this calm and comforting touch. And so I look specifically at, can we use data-driven methods? Can we look and see how people actually communicate through touch with each other, and then develop devices with actuation techniques that can replicate that? And can we maybe manipulate our perception to create what we like to call haptic illusions? So can I trick you into thinking that you're feeling something that you're not actually directly feeling? And I think this is really interesting and cool because, coupled with VR and AR, we could make that even better, adding another element in to really make this an immersive experience.
Oh, it's amazing. As someone who travels internationally a lot, I mean, the idea of being able to give a virtual hug and be able to feel that response, I can imagine will be very, very nice. Well, very good. And Nani, I mean, empathy is a huge part of your work. And so, for example, with the film that you just showed us, how are you thinking about adding touch to those virtual experiences? When do you want, or how do you want to add touch to those experiences? Nani,
I got it. So that's a project that I did back in 2013 and 14. So that's a much older video, right? But you still feel the impact of what that can be like. We put on a haptic vest on people, and obviously you'd feel vibration through we put on great, earphones. So very simple technique so that it would boom your chest when you, the bomb went off, right? We had some people who'd experienced real bombs in various situations in Lebanon, talk about how accurate it was. But more importantly, I want to talk about somebody who was deaf. So this is the one thing about this. When you talk about, people not having access to this kind of technology, the ability to use haptics, this woman who put it on, who was deaf, and I thought, well, she's going to miss the singing, or how will this affect her? And she was so moved. And we had discussions that went on for days. And so I wanted to show that specifically to really talk about the way that we can use haptics to address also ways to be more inclusive. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, I imagine being able to almost visually feel a film. I mean, it takes an entirely new dimension. That's amazing. So what I'd like to do now is actually show a couple of examples. So I do know our sponsors today have prepared a really awesome introduction to tactile gloves. And so we're going to show a quick film, and then Joe's going to tell us a little bit more about that as we dive into new questions. So let's go ahead and take a quick peek here. So some incredibly powerful visuals there. So why not, Joe, can you tell us a little bit more about sort of what we're seeing and what you're working on? Let me go ahead and open up your slides, but you may begin.
Thanks, Gavin. I appreciate that. And thanks everyone for watching that. What you just saw was the product that Haptex released in January of this year. We've been working over 8 years to come to the point where we released our first commercially available product. What you saw there, the Haptex Gloves DK2, which you're also seeing on the screen here. And we're excited about that because, as I said before, it's one of many different solutions for delivering haptics. We think it's the leading solution for conveying a realistic, lifelike sense of touch feedback in a virtual environment. And a few hours ago, we were pleased to announce that we have sold out of our first run of Haptex gloves and that we've produced. And we're now in our second production run. We just announced a $12 million new funding round to help us meet the demand for Haptex gloves. So it's been a good week and a good year. Next slide, please, Gavin. What I want to show everyone who's in the audience today is what's inside those gloves that makes it possible for us to convey the realistic sense of touch. It's a patented technology based on microfluidics. And you can see on the top left of the screen, the silicone material, which is lining the inside of Haptex gloves, and compressed air is driving these actuators across the surface of the material, and each of them can rise and fall with incredible precision. And on the bottom right, you can see how when your fingers or your hands are touching this surface, we can use the actuators to displace your skin physically and create that realistic tactile feedback, which simulates how it feels to touch a real object. Next slide, please, Gavin. So what we call this is true contact haptics, and it's because we pack 133 of those actuators inside each of the Haptex gloves. And it's this super precise tactile feedback that makes the DK2 the only haptic glove on the market that really has realistic touch feedback. Many of them have more subtle, more symbolic touch feedback. And we also have the strongest force feedback in the industry and the most accurate motion tracking system for the fingers. So we're very proud of the product, and it's been going well for a variety of customers. Gavin, why don't you hit the next slide, and I'll talk through a little bit of how it's being used. So training in VR is one of the best opportunities, I think, to put the Haptex Gloves DK2 to use. Many of our customers are using these gloves combined with high quality VR training. So you're not just learning about a skill in VR, you're learning how to physically do it. You're building real muscle memory in VR, which is a powerful opportunity for a variety of different skills. Next, Gavin. And then designers of large scale products like automobiles are using Haptex gloves for virtual design. They make these complex, beautiful 3D models, and they want to try them. They want to feel them and check if they're safe, if they're comfortable, if they're ergonomic, and they want to be able to save a lot of time and money by avoiding the need to create these big, expensive, bulky, time-consuming physical prototypes. Next slide, please. And then many companies are now using Haptex gloves to control robots from a far distance away. You can control this incredible next generation of dexterous robot hands wearing Haptex gloves, and where you move, the robot hand moves. And we're doing this in partnership with our friends in Converge Robotics Group, that's Tangible Research and Shadow Robot Company. And when you do this, you wear our gloves from any distance. You can control the robot and feel what the robot's feeling in real time with Haptex Precision. And it's a very exciting new field for us. Next slide, please. And then a certain former tech CEO who enjoys going to space and returning from space, on the day we're doing this panel, has tried this product to control the robot hands, and I think you can see in his expression just how much he enjoyed it. Next slide, please. So at Haptex, to wrap up, feeling really is believing, and we're really thrilled to be part of this today. And we hope that you will visit haptex.com to learn more about our product and to, we hope, arrange a demo. We hope to see you in person where haptics really comes to life very soon. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Joe. I think it also really helps set the stage for what we're really going to see in the not too distant future. And with that, I think that's a great opportunity for us to dive into examples. So I'd love for each of the panelists to tell us what is the coolest thing or one example that you're using with haptics in your research or that you're just aware of to give the audience an idea of what they can come to expect. So why don't we begin with you, Kara? Maybe a non-industrial use, maybe something a little closer to your research.
Yeah, so actually Joe gave a great introduction. One of the things that I think is the most exciting thing is actually this telerobotics or teleoperation, as we call it, and having like a whole, I keep saying whole body, but having more than just our hands. And so a project that I've been working on and I hope continues is doing a teleoperation of a large scale robot, so a humanoid robot. And so we could be having service robots, in our homes or in physical therapy environments, and we could be using multiple robots to sort of interact with humans and have this human robot interaction, but having haptics incorporated so that we understand the interactions that are occurring and have this real experience with the systems and the people that we're interacting with. So to me, that's really exciting.
Awesome. No, it sounds like the beginning of a super science fiction novel.
Right.
Anyway, John, tell me about your favorite use case for haptics.
So speaking of science fiction novels, so mine is reference virtual reality exoskeletons, right? And earlier I talked about driving simulators, flight simulators, that kind of stuff. That usually is a very expensive one piece of equipment that takes care of a very small end user. VR exoskeleton, which we're working towards, would allow basically any human to step into and then to experience what they need to experience and not have to have a variety of separate simulators that they would either have to get in and out of, because when you get into something like needing full experiential learning, that feeling of your environment has to be there as well. So if you can include that while you're walking through a space, climbing over something, diving out of something, and have that all inclusive, why not? We know we're going to have to be there. So this is one of the use cases that we're really looking forward to.
That's awesome. Chris, tell us about your favorite haptics use case.
Sure. So for me, I think the most exciting thing I've seen recently, and I love the DK2. It's an amazing device. If you haven't tried it, please try it as soon as you can. But for me, because my main interest is in scale and getting everyone in the world to be able to play and experience haptics directly, I'm actually really, really excited about the PlayStation 5 controller. Hopefully everyone has tried it. We kind of went through a winter of crappy haptics in gaming for maybe 18 years, something like that. And the PlayStation 5 is the first new controller that actually has both vibration and kinesthetic feedback with multiple channels. And that's cool for a couple of reasons. One, somehow Sony figured out how to make that a mass market product. It has many degrees of freedom, it's a bit complicated and so on. But for me, the most exciting thing about it actually is the content creators, the game developers have really done some super amazing stuff with that capability. And as a haptician, I guess, it always makes me really, really happy to see the technology that's been instantiated then be taken to some level that I never even conceived of and used in ways that's novel and compelling and immersive and exciting. And I really, really hope that this technology that's in the PlayStation 5 now starts to migrate into VR devices more aggressively. And Sony obviously is coming out with a new controller, but hopefully these fairly simple devices from the perspective of DK2, but still very compelling devices will become widespread. And for me, that's really the end game that we're trying to get to.
Awesome. Yeah, finally taking a step from the N64 Rumble Pack technology. It'd be nice to get. I'm excited to see a little bit more of that with the PS5. Nani, tell us about your perspective and how are you thinking about use cases for haptics? Anything in your current work or anything you've seen?
Yeah, we're working on a big project on Lyme disease, believe it or not, and telling the story about a woman who didn't get proper treatment, ended up dying. And it's really only since her autopsy we've been able to learn more about what a difficult disease this is and why it's not responsive to antibiotics. But Lyme has been a really interesting thing where for some reason the medical community started calling Lyme patients Lyme loonies. So what happened? What was that disconnect? And part of the issue is that you don't really understand the strange symptoms that are caused by the spirochete bacteria that occur when the Lyme invades your body. So we've been trying to think about how can we present this project to both the medical community as well as to our general audiences. We go to festivals, et cetera, that can include some of the strange sensations of your whole skin crawling, your feeling of like misophonia, ear issues of sound. So we've been really digging into the use case. What kind of use cases are there for us to be able to translate these strange sensations for the Lyme patient into a haptic experience?
That's fantastic. I mean, especially so people actually be able to experience what it's like living as someone else or living as someone experiencing difficult things such as that. No, that's truly remarkable. And so, Josh, I know you take a very different approach. What are you working on?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say how incredible it is to be able to work with somebody and introduce them to these technologies, because you have kind of this wow moment when you put someone in a headset, but it borders on spiritual almost, because you repeatedly hear people say, oh my God, every time that they get a sensation of touch and some kind of haptic feedback. Because if you think about it, every time you get an experience, your brain is consistently telling you at a subconscious level, where is the touch? How do I interact with this? How am I perceiving this data through my sensory organs, right? And so I'm very privileged to be able to be a semifinalist judge for the X Prizes ANA Avatar competition. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the teams come up with some kind of telerobotic avatar that incorporates some traditional and even some novel ways of incorporating haptics to overcome interacting with people at a distance. And like you said earlier, Gavin, the great example of being an international traveler and just wanting to be able to give somebody a hug, because I know I'm away from my 4-year-old right now. And I sure would love to grab her and give her a hug.
Yeah, no, it's great, especially when it starts blending into our current lives, becoming as ubiquitous as like a Zoom call. And Joe, you showed us some great examples already. Is there any you'd like to really highlight?
Well, I just want to say that thank you, Josh, for kind of explaining why my job is so much fun. I kind of get to hear, oh my God, repeatedly, year after year, which is a cool, it makes my job fun. But we have so many exciting customers and things that they're doing. One of my favorites is what the U.S. Department of Defense is doing across a variety of branches of the military to try to bring their longstanding virtual training projects, to life with more immersion using Haptex. They're thinking about training air pilots and people who maintain equipment, but the one that really gets me in the right way is the medical, the Army medics who are learning how to tie tourniquets and learning how to do blood sweeps, they call them, where you check an injured soldier for a place that's bleeding, or you can even learn how to jab a needle into the chest of someone and do a decompression when they have a chest trauma. And because you're wearing Haptex gloves, as the medic, you're really learning physically how to do these things. You're feeling the body, you're feeling the needle, you're feeling the tape that you use to wrap them up. And I think that's just a really powerful, compelling way to bring extra immersion and extra training effectiveness to these programs. And we're just excited to be part of that and can't wait to spread it beyond the military to a lot of other applications.
That's awesome. Well, let's take things now. I mean, that was a great set of use cases ranging from entertainment to empathy to industrial training to just being able to interact with a loved one. I mean, it shows you just how ubiquitous this technology will start to become. But let's dive in what's going to help get us there, where we are now and what's going to help take us into that sort of new future. Kara, you mentioned as part of your research data collection and how data collection is going to help us push haptics to the next level. Tell us a little bit more about that. So what sort of data collection are you looking at? What strategies you need? What do you need the various partners in haptics to do?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I think, you know, all the examples and ongoing work we talked about are really exciting, but one thing is missing is how do we actually relay this type of communication, right? And so the only way that we can do that is by understanding what that interaction entails. So collecting data on, you know, if you have this army example, how can we relay the type of forces that they would be feeling on an actual body? So we need to do some type of data collection as to, okay, this is the strength of the forces. This is how it would feel to palpate versus, you know, just rolling the body. And so collecting that data and then being able to render it. So understanding the control signals involved. So we're moving away from the hardware development and, you know, how do we render things with the hardware that we have? And so, you know, I come at things from an academic standpoint where it's very research driven. And so I think as we couple with industry and you know, advance this kind of goal together, it's, you know, maybe stopping just developing new techniques and new technologies, but understanding how we can actually fully use some of the systems that have been created, like the Haptex gloves are amazing. And so how can we really, you know, use them for a variety of applications? And the best way to do that is by to, you know, cast a wider net and involve more people in this sort of data collection and use case scenario, just showcasing like how well people can use it. And also another point that was brought up earlier is not everybody experiences haptics the same way. So can we sort of customize the feedback that we're providing to the individual user as well? And unfortunately, in order to do that, you need a lot of data. So.
Sounds good. Well, we are in the time of big data, but I imagine this is a new frontier, so it's going to take us some time. Chris, I know we talked a little bit earlier about interoperability. So as we think about advancing haptics to this next generation, what does that mean for content? What does that mean for the ecosystem at large? And what are some of the steps you're taking there?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really interesting point there, Kara. I want to follow up with you on that later. From our perspective, the need for interoperability is really somewhat unique to haptics because haptic systems have relatively complex tech stacks relative to, for example, audio or video. And not only that, but there's no real reference device. And so, for example, in audio, if you have a 22.2, no one has this, but they exist, 22.2 speaker setup, that's considered the reference platform. And you can actually target that as being the device that if you render to that, then you're good for any other application. In haptics, there's no such thing. There's at least 4 or 5 different categories of devices. So one of the things we've tried to do at Immersion is try to create clear delineation between, as I mentioned earlier, the content creation piece, the platform layer, and the hardware piece. And we've tried to create an ecosystem of suppliers, technology developers, et cetera, in those different layers, and then work with them to identify how they can talk to each other and kind of try to formalize that a little bit or establish some standards relative to the communication between the software layer and the hardware layer and the content tools and the software layer, et cetera. And so we're really doing that in the context of an industry group that we created called Haptics Industry Forum, which I invite everyone to join. It's completely free for the time being. And we meet monthly, and then there's a bunch of actually working groups that are establishing recommended practices for different specific areas. And for this community, we actually have a very active working group looking at enterprise VR recommended practices, what techniques, what tools, what devices, what are the methodologies, and then what are the technical recommendations from sort of the experts on the supply side for how you should incorporate and utilize haptics inside an enterprise VR use case. So training and simulation, surgical, you know, all the different ones that have been mentioned so far are all covered in that documentation. And we're really excited to try to keep that going and build momentum around it so that we have a rich ecosystem that can scale and grow and be interoperable at all levels.
Oh, that's incredible. And super important work if we want the ecosystem to be able to work together. John, we talked about a couple different challenges before, but a very real one is cost. And I know with building these massive locations, that is an expensive effort. So how is that something that you think about in terms of building access, or in terms of convincing others that this is a worthwhile investment?
It's almost a marketing campaign, right? How do you get, it comes back to location, location, location. It comes back to exposure. If you can't get somebody's hands on it, it becomes very hard to express the value, right? You need somebody to let loose resources in a certain direction. Where do they go to experience those capabilities? How do you get the workforce to experience the capabilities to help drive those requirements, where that workforce starts asking more and more of their leadership, hey, I need these kind of capabilities. Where does that even start? And so on the cost side, the other part to the cost side is just allowing our activities to be a kind of a feeder into the rest of our government workforce, where we say, hey, okay, you couldn't afford to get that, or you didn't have the money at the time. We already paid for it. Hey, come use it, right? And that's the other part about facilities. Have some place where we can push some of that equipment that we've already paid for, that the U.S. government's already paid for, and other partners in the U.S. government's able to come in and explore and leverage those capabilities. It comes down to access, right? If I'm hoarding it at my one location, I'm only doing it for me, and I'm not doing it for nobody else gets the benefit of that. And so when it comes to cost, it really is marketing the value by making sure that there's places for people to experience those capabilities.
I mean, that really is a revolutionary sort of approach for the US government, really helping break that sort of chicken and the egg sort of issue with needing access in order to promote access. But I can see sort of if you'd be able to break through that, how we might start seeing exponential growth in haptics, which is really exciting. And Josh, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing as you sort of present haptics to others, and sort of how are you solving those issues?
Yeah, it's a lot of the same lines of what John's saying is access to this equipment can be difficult, but it can be game changing when you do get past that hurdle, right? Johnson & Johnson did a study in VR for surgery, and it was like some 200+% of the people that did the experience in VR were much more capable than the people that did things in a passive way. And so if we have facilities and we build these innovation labs, like Mace just finished building an innovation lab with NIST, and helping them implement some of these technologies in a way that researchers and people pushing that forefront have more hands-on access. But at the same time, we're also building innovation labs at universities, so that even all the way to community college or high school level, so that students and people being educated are coming into the workforce with hands-on, pun intended, this technology, so that as they are out there and they're going to work at these jobs, or they're becoming research PhD students, they have this skill set with them already in hand, so that they know the tools that are available, and they're that much more capable moving it on into the field.
Oh, that's awesome. So actually almost playing a similar role in helping sort of giving people those initial engagements. And that's honestly a perfect segue. I mean, Nani, you just took on a new role at a university, at ASU. And so when you're actually thinking of leveraging these innovation labs or leveraging these technologies, how are you seeing haptics in the future of education and virtual learning?
I think one of the key reasons why I took this new position, establishing a Center for Emerging Media Narrative, was because I felt like we really needed to democratize the access to these kind of technologies, and think about how do we shift the demographics of who's participating and who's working and who's learning. And I want to flip this on its head a little bit, in the sense that not only is it amazing what people can learn through the haptics, and then take, obviously it really narrows that gap. But similarly, we have a situation where we need to go to people where they are. there's a lot of folks who might be, you know, can't get into a day-to-day university situation. They just can't afford it. There's restrictions in, you know, older students, et cetera. And I'm hoping what we'll be able to do is use kind of haptics so they can be learning alongside maybe students who are, you know, sitting next to me. That would be a dream, right? That we're able to create that full body immersion that Kara's talking about, that we're talking about haptics as being a way that we can create a more participatory educational environment. I think the pedagogy will be, you know, well served by a haptics lab. And I, as part of my curriculum, I'm definitely working on designing a space that will be one of our courses around haptics. And I welcome really all of your input as I do that.
That's incredibly exciting. No, I wish I could be back a student again and go dive into these new labs. Sounds like a great resource.
Just wanted to tag on to what everyone's saying about these innovation labs and especially educational spaces and the whatnot, is that I consistently say trying to explain these technologies is like trying to explain what it's like to ride a roller coaster if you've never been on one. Like, you can theorize it, you can see somebody else experiencing it, but until you do it yourself, there's not that aha moment that needs to happen for you to advance the research or to break the mold and rethink and reshape the box and really change things for the better. So I'd like to thank Nicole for pointing that out in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you. And in the meantime, in a second, I'm actually going to allow everyone in the audience to ask your questions. So this is a great time. If you haven't already, please go ahead and in the chat, feel free to list a bunch of questions and we'll pick some to bring it up to our panelists. So it won't just be restricted to those that I'm asking. And Joe, I do want to kind of go with one more question for you before we open it up into open Q&A. And so you just launched your new product. What are some of the next generation challenges that you're looking to be facing, and what is this next generation? What's the next generation of Haptex products going to look like, or how are you thinking about that?
Yeah. Let me just say first that it's so wonderful to hear everyone's use of haptics on this panel, and I can't wait as the industry begins to experiment with it and people bring haptics into their applications. We're going to take this in new directions that maybe none of us is even contemplating yet. So please, you know, kind of try it, get out there and you know, that's how we all learn is trying it and experimenting. And for Haptex, one of the I mean, we kind of joke that haptics is you know, a lot of science and engineering, and it's a little bit of magic, as I think Kara was sort of alluding to before. It's tricking the brain, and when you're on the sort of hyper realistic end of haptics, as my company is, it's especially difficult because your nervous system has evolved over thousands of years and has a great BS detector. And so, you know, really sort of tricking the brain into thinking that you're touching the world around you in a spatial computing environment is difficult. So that's sort of one of our two big challenges. Is first, you know, kind of taking this fine sense of touch that we've worked on and getting it ever more realistic and ever more effective for training and design and the applications we've talked about. But the second challenge is bringing more of the body into it, as you've heard many of the people talk about on this panel today. And we have some really exciting ideas for how to do that, bringing touch feedback, force feedback to other areas of the body so you can achieve what was really the original vision of our company, which is this full body immersion. So you can simulate just about any behavior, any activity, and you're not just thinking about sort of, you know, what you're touching with your hands and getting that to feel right, but involving more of your body, which just makes a lot of other elements of the natural and the 3D world feel realistic and immersive. So those are the two things we're working on, and we'll have a lot more to announce, you know, in the coming months on that.
Awesome. And for anyone who wants to try a set of Haptex gloves, I got to do a little bit of a shameless plug here. Definitely come meet us all at AWB USA or AWB Asia, where you actually get to try out some of these technologies. So we're really excited that everyone gets an opportunity to do that. But we've got some great questions here from the audience. I want to make sure we address some of those. Interesting, Nicole, here from Nicole Lazaro, asking about what's the ROI sweet spot for companies adapting haptics. So where are we expecting to see some of these technologies deployed initially? Would any of our panelists like to take a stab at this one?
I can start with that. I think that's
Yeah,
the question I get every day for the last 20 years, I think.
Sounds good.
So for us, I think, or the way we think about it anyway, is there's really two ways to think about ROI for haptics. What we're seeing actually really, which is really exciting, is that in a very boring use case, which is button replacement, there's actually a very competitive ROI that's emerging, because in a lot of automotive use cases or industrial use cases, mechanical buttons fail, or they have complex assemblies, or large arrays of buttons become expensive. And so replacing those with a single sealed haptic solution is actually a good ROI, surprisingly enough, particularly if you have maintenance issues around that. That's very, very boring, and it's not really in the spirit of this forum, but that's really an important ROI. The other sort of category of things is immersive experience. So how can you add engagement or presence or a sense of excitement to an experience? And that's much, much more difficult to quantify. This is kind of the question that other companies like Dolby or others that create advanced media experiences struggle with as well, which is, what's the value of having an immersive audio experience? Well, it's really hard to quantify. And I think that's a place where it's really, you have to try it to believe it. And then the value is in the content. At the end of the day, the value is in what you can do with it to make people more engaged and more compelled to have that experience.
Awesome. Well, we've got another great question here, which seems very pertinent. For developers that want to develop programs or content for haptics devices, where should they get started, especially if they don't necessarily have direct access to a prototype? Would any of the hardware manufacturers want to respond to that?
I'll jump in and quickly say that many hardware companies will make their SDKs available to you at low cost or no cost. I know we will do that for the right organizations. And many of us will also loan or lease our hardware to you to do the sort of second level testing with the hardware. Over time, we'll be working with universities like ASU and others, I hope, to sort of plant our hardware there, so you can get some hands-on experience. And there are lots of different levels of hardware. Some more expensive, some dirt cheap, I hope. There's even that incredibly enterprising kid, Lucas, who's building like a $25 haptic glove. So get in touch with all of us, and let's try to work something out.
Awesome. And a very sort of niche question. I'm not sure if any of our panelists know, what progress has been made on cold generating haptics? And does anyone have any sort of experience with that? I'm not sure if anyone has looked at that.
I'll just briefly say that Haptex has experimented with hot and cold thermal feedback. It's as powerful as you would imagine, and it's very hard to do. One of our developers said it was like trying to incorporate a water park inside a computer, because we used hot and cold water, and it was so we took it out of our first sort of MVP. But when we bring it back, I think the world will love it. There's nothing quite like having a dragon blow hot and cold fire across your hand to make a VR experience fun. But I think it's secondary to some of the other elements of feedback that at least we're working with.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of
those
those
also
things.
Takes a lot of power. There's a lot of power drain problems in that equation that aren't necessarily able to be addressed with our current battery technology or power delivery mechanisms and stuff. So even if you're in a tethered situation, you're going to add a lot more components and a lot more complexity to an already complex development kit era of equipment. So it's there in the background, but like Joe said, most of the manufacturers are focused solely on the primary solution of haptics, but it's definitely there.
Awesome. And a business question.
I'm sorry, Gavin. It looks like
yeah.
Nani had something to add.
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to ask a quick question about, I know that our graduate students were playing also with, ancillary objects that also can help, such as things with weights that really for chemistry students in particular, like how can you do a chemistry experiment that you still have some of the weight and the balances, but with just objects that would again trick the mind with the haptics involved glove. And I'm just wondering if that is also something on anybody's radar.
I think at least in my previous work in VR, immersive and training VR, we always had this conundrum of, do you go and get like a DK2 style solution where you can simulate holding anything you want in your hand, versus do you just go and buy a physical prop and then augment it with some kind of feedback, because it's a narrower use case where you can restrict the domain of passive haptic feedback to a specific object or artifact. And so in my experience, it really depends on how narrow or how broadly you want your solution to be applied, right? So in the DK2 situation, they're like, we can do anything, right? But if all you ever want to do is operate a gun or something, which is a fairly common use case, then you would be better off probably just buying an instrumented gun, right? At the end of the day.
Awesome. And a last question that I'll broaden it. If I encourage everyone to look at the chat too, we have a lot of people are working on haptics here and sharing a lot of interesting ideas there. So we appreciate all of that feedback for actually bringing haptic solutions to market. So does anyone on sort of the direct marketing side have any suggestions for how this could actually, how they can approach certain verticals or actually help bring these solutions into the mainstream?
Yeah, I'll go from the standpoint of an integrator and solutions architect. There's a great quote that making a prototype is easy. Making something to make your prototype is very difficult. So when you're targeting your target audience, your target vertical, make sure that they have an absolute need for the product that you're trying to bring to market, and that it's estimate 10x the cost of your prototype at least for what you're going to be looking at for bringing it to market. And that's even with just you bootstrapping it. There's a lot of technical and fiscal hurdles to overcome in manufacturing and producing a product, and that's really what industry is looking for, right? When we go to Methodist Hospital and they want us to build an innovation lab, they're not wanting us to bring them prototypes, they're wanting us to bring them products that their lead surgeon can come in, spend 5 minutes in it, get a practical sense of how that product works and how it can integrate into their workflow. So those are just some of the key points I'd bring up if you're trying to bring your own product to market.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would pile on to that. But I would just say, in my experience, people don't normally want to buy haptic devices because they're haptic devices. They're looking for they have an outcome in mind, right? They have a specific experience that they want to use the haptic devices for. Yes, PlayStation, awesome. And so if you're going to try to get someone interested in a product, a technology product, you have to bring to them a complete offering or something that's compelling at an experiential level. They have to, I think multiple people have said that when you try the DK2 or other haptic devices, you're like, wow, oh my God, this is amazing, right? That's the part you want to get to, not the technology itself. And a lot of people miss that point because they're focused on actually making the thing exist. But it's really the experience that people want to get at the end of the day.
Fantastic. Well, good to have a little bit of how this is actually going to break out. I want to thank again all of our panelists. So if we can all give them an absolute round of applause, silent snaps, whatever you want to do. So it was great to hear from all of you. This session will be recorded for those of you that joined late. It will be on the AWE YouTube channel. We'll also be sharing it out as well. For those of you that want to have a chance to reach out to any of our amazing panelists here, we're very excited to see that. And we encourage you to reach out to them directly. And thank you all for taking the time to participate in Nite. We'll continue to have these, and we hope to continue to add value to the XR community. Thank you very much.